Opus found out his wife cheated on him after he came home from a camping trip with his son and noticed her affair partner lying in his bed. Then things got crazy. Now let's get into today's story to find out what happened this past weekend. The kid overnight went on a 2-day camping trip for some father-son bonding time. My wife doesn't like camping herself at all anymore and doesn't even appreciate our kid and me going. This is a big hobby for me and I want to share it with my son. Usually we argue a lot about my trips, especially if I request to bring our child. But this time she was oddly cooperative about the whole thing, though she still insisted she would join us. I was surprised but didn't question anything because I was so excited that she was finally allowing us to go and I didn't want her to change her mind. I thought we had finally found common ground and the arguments were ending. I was wrong. We had a great trip and returned back on Monday. We expected to come home to an empty house, as my wife should have been at her office for a few more hours. I walked the kid up to his room as he was exhausted and ready for a nap. Afterward, I walked into her bedroom to find a naked man in my bed. I recognized him as my wife's coworker, whom I have met numerous times at her work functions. At first, I was in disbelief and even wondered if I was in the right house. Then my wife walked out of her bathroom also naked, and I had no more doubts. She looked petrified when she saw me. I have never been so angry. I yelled at the dude to get out of my house so I could speak to my wife. He grabbed his clothes and left. Then we started arguing. I never yelled at my wife. We always want to keep things civil for our son, but I was so hurt. I was screaming. Then my wife decided to get defensive, and she said it was not her fault that I was barely around and kept so much, even though I hardly go on trips anymore because she doesn't like it. She said, "That's what drove me to do this. Your neglect of this family." I was in tears at that point. I just don't understand how her cheating could be my fault. When I turned around to leave, my son was standing in the doorway and I felt terrible for yelling. I quickly consoled him, but my wife snapped at me again, telling me to get my hands off him. Now she won't speak to me and says, "I can't see my child until I apologize." "Apologize for what?" she said. "We could go on this trip." She planned to cheat. And that kills me. It makes me wonder if she has done this before. I'm stuck staying with my parents right now. I don't know what to do. I want to see my son. I'm worried. I really scared my child. And of course, I would apologize to him. Just not my wife. But maybe it is my fault. For the past week, I have been working with a lawyer to initiate the process of divorce and gain full custody of my son with the exception of visitation. For now, until more is resolved. Things were awkward and intense for the first few days of my being back home. So my wife, using ways to keep things simple and identities private, decided to leave to stay with the guy I found naked with her. I'm disappointed at the example she's setting for her son, but this makes my decision to divorce even more concrete. I will continue to share as much as I can, if that's what people would like. But of course the court has its confidentiality that I must keep within its boundaries. Update: last week I received several texts from my ex saying she was pregnant with an unknown man's child. Obviously, meaning she cheated with multiple other people before the one I found out about. She said she plans to keep the baby and start a family with her coworker. She also mentioned that she wouldn't be fighting me for custody of her son. I told her I would be willing to split custody or at least keep visitation rights for the sake of the kiddo. But she insisted she didn't care about that anymore. I am modestly and all. I'm shocked. She has given up on everything about the family we had. But I am most hurt for my son. At the end of the day, she isn't worth wasting any more of my energy on. I have been spending every moment I can with my kid and will continue to do so. I'm starting to feel more like myself again and can't wait to get back into adventures in nature. Well, Opus, she deserves to never have her son speak to her. She might as well disown the poor child. What a selfish excuse for a human. She can't even give a proper reason for cheating. You need to file for full custody as well as child support. This monster of a woman can be away from your son for good. My thought would be that if you can afford it, have her sign away her rights as a parent and make sure she has no visitation rights. This ideally would mean she can't turn up years from now and demand visitation. It should also mean that if you're married and you all agree your son could be adopted without involving your ex, getting child support, etc., it's understandable if you need it and your ex-husband will have any money. I presume you could have paperwork stating you have 100% physical custody and any visitation would be supervised as well as agreed on by both parties. So you control it. It just leaves an open door for your ex. So cover all your bases in your paperwork, including an airtight will. So if you were to pass away, your ex can't claim your son and can't get any of his inheritance. You also need to start saving up to get your son into therapy. He is 7 years old and is old enough to remember his mother abandoning him. Therapy will help him get over the trauma his mother has caused him and will teach him to have a good foundation for life. I wish you good luck, Opus, and hope that you and your son have a happy and adventurous life. I hope your ex has the life that she has earned. Now let's get into today's second story. I just recently found out that my girlfriend of almost 7 years has been cheating on me for a few weeks now. My girlfriend and I have been dating since middle school, and we always talked about marrying each other and being the only ones for each other. But now I'm not so sure. I first knew something was up when I saw that she wouldn't stop texting one of her work friends. I asked her about the guy and she told me that it was just some 30-year-old weirdo at work and that they just get along really well. But I always knew something was up. A few weeks later, I had to pry out of her that the guy was making moves on her. She told me that he would constantly try to kiss her, but that she moved away every time. I wanted to believe and trust her, but I still had a strong feeling that something was up. Well, fast forward a few weeks and I was at my girlfriend's place with her and some friends. She spontaneously decided that it was a good idea to go pick up grilled cheese. She decided that so quickly that I didn't have time to go with her. She just left. An hour went by and I started getting suspicious. I called her a few times, but she kept saying the line was longer, that the train was crossing. She finally got home and we all ate and everyone passed out. I stayed up and checked her phone. I ended up reading the suspicious and vague text conversation that she and the guy were having that night around the time after she came back from getting the food. I was so worried. You left so quickly. I was getting worried when you didn't pick up your phone. I felt like some messages were missing, so I kept reading their texts from the past few days on her phone. I found that they texted a lot more than me in her texts. They were staying up until as late as 7 a.m., texting every minute on multiple occasions. Eventually, I found a conversation where he said, "I love the way you close your eyes when you kiss me." This was all the proof I needed to confront her. I woke her up. It was 5 in the morning by then and tried to get her to confess. But you wouldn't. She just kept lying right to my face. I really wanted to believe her, as this was the girl that I had loved for so many years. But how could I? After reading the conversations she was having with him, the next morning I talked to her about it again. She kept saying that he was crazy and she had no idea what he was talking about. I said, if he was crazy, then why didn't she text him right then and ask him? She said she would, but I felt so bad for stooping that low. So I said, never mind. She kept trying to guilt me into admitting that I didn't trust her, and she kept telling me that I could trust her. So I tried to. I spent that whole day alone and crying as she was at work. All I wanted to do was believe her. But I knew deep down that she had cheated on me. Later that night, while she was still at work, I went to her house and got her iPads. I knew that messages would sync onto her other devices and I wanted to see if she really did delete messages with the guy. And guess what she did? I read that she did, in fact, go to his house that night and that they were all cuddled up and wrapped in each other's arms. I also read that she texted him, "Be prepared to lie for me. He wants me to ask you about why you said that. You like kissing me." She tried so hard to cover up her tracks, but I was willing enough to stoop so low and read her messages on her iPad. I felt terrible for doing that, but it worked. I learned the truth after I read all of that. I sent her pictures of the conversation and she came home a little later and we talked about it. The conversation was mostly me yelling at her, calling her names and such, and asking about everything they did. She claimed they never had sex or anything, and that they just made out a few times. I know she's lying about how many times. She also said that she spent the night at his house twice, but it was just for cuddling. I really want to believe that she thinks very poorly about her body figure. She's only comfortable being naked or even half naked around me. And I did read some of her texts where she said stuff along the lines of if I wanted to have sex, we would have had sex already, or stuff where she just talked crap about her body and him saying, I'm sure it isn't that bad stuff. That makes me want to believe that they didn't have sex. But she still lied to my face. Countless times, even after I confronted her with proof. I eventually said, you know, we can't be together anymore after this. And she just started crying her eyes out. She wouldn't stop crying. I kept trying to leave and take some of the clothes I left there with me, but she kept pulling me back and grabbing onto me. She wouldn't stop telling me how much she loved me and that it was a mistake, and that now that she knew what it was like to lose me, that she wouldn't ever do something like that to me again. And I honestly do want to believe her. This is the girl I have loved since middle school, but she has lied to me so much that I'm not sure if I can do it. She drove up to school with me for a few days. I lived 3 hours away from school and I was down home for the weekend, and it was enjoyable. We were together the entire time, and it made me realize that I can't picture life without her. But now she's back home where he is, and I just can't trust her anymore. I have been freaking out every day since she left, not knowing what she was doing or who she was. But since I just can't trust her anymore. She said she understood and that she was going to earn my trust back. But I've read so many other cheating stories on here that it seems like I'm just never going to trust her again. She turned on her location for me, but she could easily just set the location to her iPad and trick me into thinking that she was home. She still hangs out with the same group of friends. The guy she cheated on me with is in this friend group, and it's destroying me. I know, she's just trying to have fun with work friends, but how am I supposed to believe that she's really done with him? What do you guys think of this situation, Barb? If your girlfriend and her new boyfriend were still in junior high, I would agree that they only kissed and cuddled. However, they're adults and adults have sex. She didn't text this hard and this often to cover up kisses and cuddles with a man she didn't care about. She slept with him and still won't stop hanging around him and his friends. She didn't make a mistake. What she did was wrong. She chose to lie to you. She chose to betray you. And she chose to gaslight you to cover it up. You will not know one day of peace, so long as she is still in your life, as she has proven herself to be completely untrustworthy.